The 2022 FIFA World Cup host Qatar has recently come out with what they call the Qatar National Vision 2030. The government claims that it aims at transforming Qatar into an advanced country by 2030 capable of sustaining its own development and providing for a high standard of living for all of its people for generations to come. They claim that they'll be able to improve environmental development using Lusail City as a prime example of what is to come. According to what Qatar shares with the press, Lusail is a smart city project intended to house its rising population of expats. Of the 2.3 million people who live in the country, fewer than 315,000 are native Qataris. The plan is to make a hip, modern and sustainable location for remote and domestic workers, a fun place to spend their money. Apparently, what gives Lusail this smart city status is sustainable facilities and utilities. The most notable being a district cooling system. 175 kilometres of piping are projected to save an estimated 200,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide annually. They also make a big deal out of their move to focus on the production of natural gas, which produces 25% less carbon dioxide than gasoline, 27% less than fuel oil, 30% less than crude oil, and 45% less than coal. But these figures still don't represent a long-term solution because this still requires continual extraction of non-renewable resources. With foreign labourers continuing to come out in large numbers calling for major reforms related to the insanely antiquated kafala system, something that made headlines during and after the FIFA World Cup, the chasm separating Qatar from its 2030 objectives appears to be widening. Then there is Bahrain, which is noted for spearheading the post-oil economic movement, investing in banking and tourism sectors since the late 20th century. They've also expanded their industrial network to include the production of aluminium, signing a free trade agreement with the United States to expand their export base. In 2002, oil made up 42% of Bahrain's GDP, but by 2023, it had declined to 14.5%. The UAE is also applauded for its efforts to diversify. Currently, they're investing in sectors including technology, health, education, renewable energy, and transportation through their sovereign wealth fund. The UAE claims that this fund is making strides to boost social entrepreneurship for the next generation, teaching them ways to capitalise in the post-oil era. These programs are heavily focused on the technology sector, with goals to teach Emirati children how to code, support Emirati researchers and high-tech startups, and to support small and mid-sized enterprises that encourage positive social impacts. Now, although this sounds positive, all of these countries are falling for the same trap. They've become incredibly wealthy, at least on the surface, thanks to their oil wealth, and this has afforded them a glamorous lifestyle akin to, or even exceeding, most advanced economies. So, they're trying to replace this unsustainable industry with the advanced, glamorous industries they see in other advanced economies. But they're not advanced economies. In fact, they are extremely basic economies. Advanced industries like building smart cities to house coders and social entrepreneurs, whatever that means, sounds great, but there is no competitive advantages to running these industries in the Gulf over more established global centres like Silicon Valley or even Shenzhen. Since these countries are all targeting industries that will compete globally, they need to provide a competitive reason why profit-driven businesses should operate there over the places they always have. For now, that reason is because businesses can enjoy tax breaks and a flow of oil money, but when that stops, any advantage that the Gulf states had over existing centres will stop too, and the underlying issues with the region will be the only thing left. For Saudi Arabia, the situation is largely the same. The oil sector alone generated an estimated gross domestic product of approximately 607.7 billion Saudi riyals. That said, the total estimated GDP for the year was about 2.62 trillion Saudi riyals, or almost $650 billion US. Much of this comes from the private sector. So they are attempting to diversify and privatise, but unfortunately the way they're doing it is almost as unsustainable as the oil extraction they're trying to replace. A perfect example of this has to do with their interest in the EV market, specifically Lucid Motors, an automotive and technology company that makes electric vehicles and supplies advanced electric vehicle powertrain systems. The problem with this move, for one, is that these vehicles are horrendously expensive, with the price of a 2025 Lucid Air expected to start around $71,400 and go up to $251,000 depending on the trim and options. Even at that price, Lucid is a long way from being a profitable company. More accurately, all it's done so far is hemorrhage money. In 2023, Tesla produced 1.8 million vehicles, the company Rivian produced 57,000, and Lucid on the other hand produced just under 8,500. Right now, it's a minor play compared to other well-known electric vehicle makers. To make matters worse, the Saudi Public Investment Fund has pumped exorbitant amounts of money into Lucid and it has a 60% stake in the company's faltering business. Their shares were once worth over $55 billion, but now it's worth just a little over $5. Lucid's gross margins remained hugely negative due to low production volumes. Basically, the Saudis, and arguably their most popular mascot for economic diversification, still make a loss on every single car. The company should have gone bankrupt, but the Saudi government keeps pouring money into it because they're trying to build a high-end auto industry in Saudi Arabia. Theoretically, the dream of a luxury EV company sponsored by the Saudis could work, but the automotive industry is extremely competitive, and there's no comparative advantage to building high-end cars in the Persian Gulf over building them in regions that have more skilled auto workers, or even just a history of producing high-end automobiles. People will happily shell out six figures for a car made in Germany, Italy, or even the USA, but a six-figure car made by a relatively unknown company in the King Abdullah economic city is a little bit more of a hard sell. So why are they doing all this? Well, it all goes back to trying to replicate the glamour of an advanced economy by just making the industries of an advanced economy. They're the national equivalent of trying to start a party by just spending lots of money on it. The money might attract a crowd, but as soon as it dries up, people are going to leave and go back to a place where they can actually have a good time. The real solution is just to embrace the mundane and admit that isolated cities in the middle of the desert are going to struggle to accommodate major global industries. But that's okay. With so much oil money floating around, the countries in the Persian Gulf could easily create a sovereign wealth fund that just invests internationally for the good of its people. A low population state like Alaska does this with its permanent fund. The Gulf states have far more oil and far fewer native citizens. Of course, they do technically have established sovereign wealth funds at their disposal, but they are highly opaque and are used more as the personal piggy bank of the ruling families. A sovereign wealth fund that invests in real sustainable businesses and is transparent could easily fund a very high standard of living for the small native population of these countries well after the oil industry has moved out. But there's the reason that these dynasties don't usually encourage such an idea. Safe, sustainable investment isn't as glamorous as mega projects and being an international business hub. The ruling families are set for life anyway, and it's understandably hard to give up on being a globally influential monarch to instead oversee a small, forgotten country of comfortable citizens. The economic success of the Persian Gulf, coming from a state of total nomadic poverty just over a century ago to literally a powerhouse that many nations depend on, comes with a sense of problematic pride. Pride that creates a division between the working and noble classes, and perhaps most evident, pride that makes the country's leadership think they have all the time in the world. If the Persian Gulf wants to survive the post-oil era, they're going to have to be humble and pragmatic, which is an ideological barrier the region has yet to overcome. But to be fair, it could be worse. They could be Venezuela. You should be able to click to that video on your screen now to see how bad this could get if not managed effectively. Thanks for watching, mate. Bye.